Kiwi broke up. My ex-girlfriend secretly sold my dog. She lied to me. He ran away. She acted heartbroken. I believed her until I saw the buyer's post. But as she was bragging about her upcoming vacation, the police knocked on her door for theft. My name is Julian Vance. I'm 30 years old, and I'm a marketing data manager in Portland, Oregon. My world runs on patterns, logic, and finding actionable intelligence hidden in noise. It's a valuable skill set, though one I never wanted to apply to my deepest emotional bond. That bond was Ranger. He was a massive but gentle golden retriever, a retired service dog who came into my life during a rough patch 3 years ago. He wasn't just a pet. He was my anchor, my shadow, and my only constant. Legally, Ranger was my property, microchipped and registered solely under my name. Emotionally, he was family. Then came Chloe. We met a year after I got Ranger. She was vibrant, ambitious, and she initially pretended to adore him. She loved the image of the responsible dog owner, but she quickly grew to hate the reality of the muddy paws and the early morning walks. Our relationship was built on a fragile imbalance. I provided the stability, the income, the mortgage payments, the emotional security. Chloe, meanwhile, struggled with her career and grew increasingly focused on external validation and material wealth. Her affection for me quickly became conditional upon my ability to fund her desired lifestyle. The conflict intensified when Ranger became an inconvenience to her social life. He shed too much. He barked when her friends came over. She started leaving him alone for long hours, pressuring me to keep him confined to my office while she entertained guests. The pressure was relentless, always tied to money. She'd mock my steady, boring salary while hinting that she needed someone who could provide real luxury and spontaneous travel. I always worked harder, believing that if I provided enough, she would finally be content. The eventual breakup was messy, fueled by Chloe's contempt for my inability to fund her high-end dreams. I was devastated by the loss of the relationship, but I fought hard to keep Ranger. He was the single, non-negotiable piece of the old life I cherished. Chloe, surprisingly, agreed easily to the custody split. Fine. You take him. I'm done dealing with the shedding and the early walks, she said, her voice dripping with finality. I moved into a small rental apartment, taking Ranger with me. His massive, reassuring weight next to me every night was the only thing that kept me grounded. I didn't know then that while I was grieving, Chloe was planning the final, most callous betrayal of all. She saw Ranger not as a life, but as a liability she could liquidate. And she was about to use her knowledge of my routine to steal my most valuable asset for a mere $4,000. The friction between us intensified rapidly in the final months of our relationship. Chloe grew visibly tired of the pretense, tired of pretending that a mortgage and a steady salary were enough for her future. The climax of our relationship came one rainy Sunday afternoon, fueled by a pointless argument about money. She demanded that I sell my motorcycle and invest the money in a more socially acceptable car. I refused, saying the bike was the one thing I kept just for myself. That refusal triggered a week of cold silence, followed by an explosion. "I'm done, Julian," she finally screamed. "I can't live like this. Your life is too small. I need more than a man who talks to a dog and stares at spreadsheets." It was a devastating confession of contempt, but I accepted it. I was heartbroken by the loss of the relationship, but my focus remained on Ranger. The dog was my property, microchipped in my name, and my emotional lifeline. We agreed to split the furniture, the bills, and the lease. I asked her one final simple question. "What about Ranger?" He comes with me, no argument. Chloe, surprisingly, agreed easily. Fine. You take him. I'm done dealing with the shedding and the early walks, she said, her voice dripping with finality. 2 days later, I was at work when I got the text. It was from Chloe, sounding utterly distraught. Julian, call me. Ranger is gone. I took him out for a walk this morning and his leash snapped. He ran away. I'm heartbroken. She launched into a full, convincing performance. Tearful calls to my mother, desperate posts on local missing pet groups, and frantic texts detailing every street she had supposedly searched. She cried on the phone, her voice shaking with convincing sorrow. I believed her because I wanted to believe that losing him was just an accident. I immediately left work, drove home, and spent the entire evening driving through Portland's parks, calling his name until my throat was raw. I spent the next 3 days in a state of emotional devastation, printing flyers, coordinating with shelters, and fielding sympathetic calls from neighbors. I grieved for Ranger, the loss compounding the pain of the breakup. Chloe, meanwhile, continued her performance, sending me updates on her searches and texts about how much she missed him. Her ability to lie with such conviction was terrifying and ultimately successful. I never suspected the truth until the sheer exhaustion of searching led me to a quiet scroll through social media late one night. It was there, on a small niche breeder's page, under a photo of a happy golden retriever sitting next to a new owner. The caption called him Trooper and mentioned a local seller and being worth every penny. My heart stopped. The dog in the photo, the massive, goofy smile, the specific patch of white fur on his chest. It was unmistakably Ranger. The discovery hit me with the force of a physical blow. I stared at the image on the screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. The specific patch of white fur on his chest, the way his ears folded. It was Ranger. But the caption called him Trooper and mentioned a local seller and being worth every penny. The grief I had felt for a lost pet immediately twisted into something cold and metallic, betrayal and focused rage. I closed the app, took a deep, unsteady breath, and drove back to my old condo. I knew I couldn't just confront Chloe. I needed data. I needed irrefutable proof of ownership and the financial transaction she had executed. My mind, the mind of a data manager, began to function on pure protocol. I drove straight to my mother's house to retrieve Ranger's original adoption papers, his vaccination history, and most importantly, his microchip registration details. The documentation was clean, complete, and legally undeniable, registered solely under my name. Then, the transaction. I contacted the online breeders page, posing as a casual buyer interested in their adoption process. The breeder confirmed they had facilitated a private, cash-only sale for a golden retriever named Trooper 3 days prior for $4,000. I knew Chloe had been desperate for cash for her upcoming luxury trip. The money was a clear motive. But the real piece of the puzzle came from contacting the buyer. I contacted the new owner, feigning concern and saying I believed Trooper was a dog I had briefly fostered and was simply ensuring his safety. She was sympathetic and sent me copies of the adoption paperwork she'd received from the seller. The documents, signed by Chloe, listed her name and a forged address. Crucially, the papers contained a clause guaranteeing the dog was legally owned and free from liens. The documentation was damning. It proved Chloe sold my property, lied about ownership, and gained $4,000 under false pretenses. This was no longer a domestic spat. This was actionable fraud. The decision was made. I would allow Chloe to believe she had won, to finalize her plans for the luxury trip, before the system I was now triggering delivered the final, undeniable verdict. I called my attorney, a corporate lawyer named Ben, who specialized in property disputes, not divorce. I laid out the entire case: the microchip ID, the fraudulent bill of sale, the price, and the social media evidence. Ben listened without interrupting, his voice serious when he finally spoke. "Julian, pet theft is a felony. The dog is legally property. This is grand larceny. We can file criminal charges. I didn't want revenge. I wanted Ranger back, and I wanted Chloe to face the consequences of her callousness. I was ready to move with legal precision. I would allow her arrogance to be her undoing." My lawyer, Ben, took the case with chilling efficiency. He filed the initial report, classifying the incident as grand larceny, the theft of personal property valued over a set threshold. He focused purely on the transaction, not the domestic drama. "We want the police to treat this as a clear-cut crime, Julian," Ben advised. "We need the arrest to happen when she least expects it, and ideally, when she's celebrating the money she stole." The goal was maximum public fallout. I immediately set up monitoring protocols. I knew Chloe's Achilles heel was her need for external validation, especially before a lavish trip. I waited for her to announce a farewell party or a celebratory gathering. Within 2 days, she obliged. A post appeared on her private social media feed. "Last night in Portland before Cancun. Come celebrate my much-deserved break." The party was scheduled for Saturday night, the final chance for her to brag before leaving the country. I coordinated the timing with Ben and the Portland Police Bureau's Property Crime Division. The plan was surgical. The arrest would occur mid-party, while she was holding court and celebrating the stolen funds. The emotional side of the strategy was crucial: retrieving Ranger. I called the buyer again, this time revealing the truth gently. I explained that Trooper was actually Ranger, that he was stolen property, and that I had the microchip records to prove it. The buyer, an older woman who had genuinely bonded with the dog, was horrified and cooperative. She agreed to bring Ranger to a predetermined neutral location on Saturday evening, just blocks from Chloe's party. The exchange had to be flawless. I would retrieve Ranger while the police were processing the theft charge against Chloe. This ensured Chloe couldn't use the dog as a final bargaining chip, and it gave me the emotional payoff I needed. My lawyer then filed the final paperwork, a civil suit demanding the return of the $4,000 sale price, citing fraudulent misrepresentation. He also had the police secure a search warrant, allowing them to collect the remaining evidence, the travel documents and cash used for the trip. On Friday, Chloe texted me, sounding cheerful and oblivious. "You're going to miss me, Julian. My flight leaves Monday morning. 2 weeks in paradise." I typed back a short, cold response. "Have a safe trip." She interpreted it as bitterness or resignation. She had no idea she was reading a final confirmation from the man who was about to orchestrate her public collapse. The party was exactly the kind of spectacle Chloe thrived on. It was held at a trendy rooftop bar overlooking downtown Portland, a place buzzing with loud music and her entire network of social climbing friends. This wasn't a party. It was her victory lap. I didn't attend. I observed. I sat in my truck 2 blocks away, watching the entrance through a long lens camera I used for wildlife photography. I was the invisible security manager, timing the operation. My lawyer had arranged for a contact to be inside, a colleague of mine who agreed to monitor the situation and give me the signal when Chloe's bragging reached its peak. The plan was simple: The arrest needed to occur at the height of her arrogance. Inside, she was radiant. My contact texted updates. Chloe was holding court, champagne in hand, talking loudly about the spontaneous nature of her trip. She painted a picture of herself as a free spirit who had shrugged off a boring ex and was now embracing luxury. The emotional damage from her performance was real. I thought about the 3 days I spent driving through parks, calling Ranger's name, while she was calculating how to spend the cash she got for selling him. Her joy was built on my devastation. Then the signal came. She's talking money now. Go. I drove slowly to the alley behind the venue, meeting the police detail. Detective Ramos, a woman with a severe ponytail and no patience for domestic nonsense, was waiting. I handed her the sealed envelope containing Ranger's microchip documentation, the fraudulent bill of sale, and the buyer's contact information. The dog is worth more emotionally than financially, Detective, I explained. But legally, it's a clear case of felony theft. She looked at the documentation, then back at me. She told the buyer he ran away and sold him for $4,000 to fund a vacation? Yes, I confirmed. We have the address of the buyer. The dog will be retrieved simultaneously with the arrest. Your emotional justice is guaranteed. I confirmed the position of the buyer's contact person, who was already en route to the designated handoff location. The coordination was tight, precise, and completely focused on maximizing the shock. I watched as Detective Ramos and 2 uniformed officers moved toward the service entrance of the bar. The air thrummed with a nervous energy I hadn't felt since I was in the military reserve. This was it, the final confrontation, delivered not by a tearful ex-boyfriend, but by the legal system. Just before they entered, I received one final text from my contact inside. She just raised a toast to new beginnings and unexpected windfalls. She's bragging about the cash. Chloe was completely oblivious, celebrating her crime until the very last second. I put my phone away. I hadn't wanted revenge. I wanted justice, and more importantly, I wanted my dog back. The time for waiting was over. The signal was given, and the operation began. I sat in my truck, watching the figures of Detective Ramos and the 2 uniformed officers disappear around the service entrance of the rooftop bar. The energy that had fueled my revenge was suddenly replaced by cold, focused dread. I pulled up the GPS coordinates for the designated handoff location a few blocks away. Inside the bar, the music didn't stop. The police entrance was swift and precise. Detective Ramos, her face stern, walked straight toward the section where Chloe and her friends were celebrating. My contact later told me the moment was cinematic. Chloe was holding court, champagne glass in hand, right in the middle of a sentence about how smart she was to fund her trip with cash. Ramos tapped her shoulder. Chloe, annoyed, turned and smiled, ready to dismiss the interruption. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked, her voice laced with PR charm. Ramos didn't smile. "Chloe Vance, I have a warrant for your arrest." The music seemed to warp. The laughter died instantly. Chloe's perfect composure dissolved into shock. "Arrest? For what?" "This is a mistake," she stammered, looking frantically at her friends. "We're investigating the felony theft of personal property," Ramos stated clearly, pulling out the handcuffs. "Specifically, a golden retriever, microchip ID 9810000XXX. The word felony resonated through the sudden silence of the bar. Chloe's friends, moments ago her cheering squad, stepped back, their faces turning from curiosity to immediate horror. She looked around for help, but found only condemnation. She tried one last time to lie. That dog ran away. This is harassment. We have the buyer's bill of sale and your signed fraudulent documents, Ramos countered, unmoved. The dog did not run away. You sold him for $4,000. You are being charged with grand larceny. As the officers escorted a hysterical, resisting Chloe out of the venue through the service entrance, I drove to the handoff location. The emotional weight of the arrest was nothing compared to the anticipation of the reunion. I pulled up to the quiet side street. The buyer, the sweet older woman I had spoken to, was standing there with Ranger. The moment I opened my car door and called his name, Ranger, the silence shattered. Ranger didn't run. He flew. He slammed into me, whining and barking in a frenzy of absolute pure joy. His massive paws scrambled for purchase on my chest, his wet nose pressing into my neck. I sank to my knees on the cold asphalt, clutching his huge body, burying my face in his thick fur. The grief and betrayal of the last few days evaporated instantly, replaced by the overwhelming, unconditional loyalty of the best friend I thought I had lost forever. The microchip, the legal documents, the police reports, all the cold, calculated data had led to this single, perfect moment of emotional justice. The buyer, seeing the undeniable bond, simply handed me his leash. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm just glad he's back where he belongs." I thanked her, tears finally blurring my vision. I drove away from the scene of the crime and the simultaneous scene of the arrest, not with the intention of revenge, but with the profound satisfaction of a man whose loyalty had finally been rewarded. Chloe got her spectacle. I got my family back. The drive back to Portland with Ranger in the passenger seat was the quietest, most peaceful drive of my life. His massive head rested on my thigh, his occasional sigh a sound of deep, unconditional contentment. I was exhausted, bruised by the emotional violence of the last week, but the wait in the car was good. It was loyalty, warm and breathing. I didn't let him out of my sight. The first thing I did when we got home was check his microchip with my personal scanner, verifying his presence and his safety. We both collapsed onto the floor of my apartment, sleeping in a tangle of limbs and fur, the sound of his steady breathing finally silencing the frantic ringing of my phone. The chaos I had triggered abroad quickly followed Chloe home. Detective Ramos had provided a brief clinical update. Chloe was released on bail, but she faced felony charges for larceny, fraud, and misrepresentation. She was also legally obligated to appear in court and was completely barred from contacting me or approaching Ranger. The fallout was immediate and public. Her friends, who had witnessed the arrest at the rooftop bar, quickly distanced themselves. The local social pages that had celebrated her spontaneous break were now filled with murmurs about the arrest and the dog theft. The money she stole, the $4,000 cash from the sale, was gone, spent on the non-refundable tickets and the initial resort package. The civil suit I filed guaranteed that she would eventually owe me that money, plus court costs. Her dream vacation had bankrupted her, cost her freedom, and destroyed her social standing. I looked at the chaos I had created, the police reports, the legal filings, the social ruin, and felt not triumph, but clarity. It wasn't revenge I sought. It was restoration. I used my data analysis skills one last time, not for destruction, but for construction. I found a new, quieter apartment with a fenced backyard that was perfect for Ranger. I poured my focus back into my work, using the discipline I had learned in the military reserve to build a life immune to her chaos. Chloe attempted one final manipulation. A letter sent through her lawyer, begging me to drop the charges, claiming she was going through a breakdown. I replied with a single, unadorned statement. The evidence of theft and fraud is a matter of public record. I will not drop the charges. I never saw her again. She became a fixed point in my past, a cautionary tale about trusting charisma over character. Ranger, meanwhile, became the center of my life again. He was my proof that some bonds, the ones built on quiet, unconditional love, can survive even the most callous betrayal. I had lost a partner, but I reclaimed my most valuable asset, and that, I realized, was the only justice that truly mattered.